5 most disturbing nice guy serial killer stories. He was the only person with a key to my new apartment, and he used it every single day while I was at work. I didn't know it then. I didn't even suspect it. I was just happy to finally found a place in Brooklyn that didn't feel like a shoebox. But the first sign wasn't a broken lock or a missing laptop. It was the smell. A faint, lingering scent of expensive sandalwood cologne in my bathroom. I live alone. I don't use men's cologne. And by the time I found the crawl space hidden behind my wardrobe, he was already standing in my kitchen, holding a hammer. If you've ever had a neighbor or a landlord who seemed just a little too nice, you might want to listen closely. This is the kind of story that makes you change your locks the second it's over. My name's Claire. I'm 27, a freelance graphic designer. And like most people my age in New York, I spent 3 years living with 3 different roommates in a cramped place in Queens. When I finally saved up enough to get my own studio, I thought I'd made it. The building was an old, beautifully renovated brownstone. It had character, it had history, and most importantly, it had Arthur. Arthur was the building manager, a soft-spoken man in his late 60s with silver hair and these very kind, crinkly eyes. On the day I moved in, he didn't just hand me the keys. He spent 3 hours helping me carry heavy boxes of books and equipment up the stairs. He refused to take any money for it. He just smiled and told me that he liked to see young professionals succeeding. For the first month, Arthur was a godsend. If a faucet leaked, he was there within 10 minutes. If a light bulb flickered in the hallway, it was replaced before I even had to mention it. He was the definition of a nice guy. He'd leave little notes under my door sometimes, just checking in. Hope the deadline went well, or the weather is turning cold. Make sure your heater is working. It felt like having a protective grandfather living in the basement's apartment. I felt safe. In a city like this, safety is a luxury you usually have to pay extra for, and I thought I'd found it for a bargain. But then the atmosphere started to shift. It was subtle at first. I'd come home from a coffee shop after working all afternoon, and I'd notice my desk chair was tucked in differently. I'm a creature of habit. I always leave it at a slight angle so I can slide right back in. One day it was pushed perfectly flush against the desk. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that maybe the vibrations from the subway nearby had caused it to move. Then I noticed the smell. I was brushing my teeth one Tuesday night when I caught a whiff of it. Sandalwood. It was heavy, earthy, and expensive. It was the kind of scent that clings to fabric. I searched my entire bathroom, thinking maybe a previous tenant had spilled some oil under the sink, but there was nothing. The smell was fresh. It was as if someone had just stepped out of the room. My heart did a quick little double tap against my ribs, but I forced myself to breathe. I checked the front door, locked. I checked the windows, latched. I told myself it was the ventilation system. Old buildings have weird airflow. That's what I kept telling myself. By the second month, the nice guy persona Arthur projected started to feel heavy. He began showing up at my door without me calling him. He'd have a wrench in his hand and say he thought he heard a pipe knocking from the basement. He'd stay for 20 minutes, talking about his late wife or his hobby of restoring old watches. He never did anything inappropriate, but he would look around the room with this intense, scanning gaze. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at my things, my laundry basket, my nightstand, the mail on my counter. The escalation happened on a Thursday. I was cleaning the ceiling fans, something I rarely do, and I noticed something odd about the smoke detector. It was a brand new model, white and plastic, positioned right above my bed. I hadn't noticed it before because, well, who looks at smoke detectors? But as I wiped the dust away, I saw a tiny, glinting circle of glass embedded in the plastic. It wasn't a sensor. It was a lens, a high-end, wide-angle camera lens. My stomach dropped into my shoes. I felt a cold, prickling sensation wash over my skin. I wasn't just being watched, I was being recorded. I didn't call the police right away. I know that sounds stupid, but when you're in a situation like that, your brain tries to find a logical exit. I thought maybe it was for insurance. Maybe the building had some weird policy. But deep down, I knew. I waited until I knew Arthur was out running errands for the building. I went to the basement where his office was. The door was locked, but the window near the ceiling was cracked open for ventilation. I'm small and I was desperate. I climbed through. His office was spotless. It smelled like that same sandalwood cologne. I started opening drawers, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the handles. In the bottom drawer of his desk, hidden under a stack of plumbing manuals, I found it. A leather-bound notebook. I opened it, expecting to see maintenance logs. Instead, I saw my name. There were pages and pages of notes. He had my entire life documented. Claire woke up at 7:15 a.m., wore the blue sweater, had eggs for breakfast. He had my grocery lists copied down. He had my menstrual cycle tracked in red ink. He had notes on who called me and how long I stayed on the phone. But the most horrifying part was the floorboard. Behind his desk, one of the wooden planks looked slightly uneven. I pried it up with a letter opener. Tucked inside was a collection of items. My spare hairbrush that I thought I'd lost a week ago. A single earring. A pair of my pajamas that had gone missing from the laundry room. And then I saw the photos. Hundreds of them. They weren't just taken from the smoke detector. They were taken from inside the apartment while I was sleeping. He had been standing in my room, feet away from my bed, taking photos of me while I was unconscious. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The nice guy who helped me with my boxes, the man who checked my heater, the man I trusted with my safety, he was a predator who had spent every day invading the one place I was supposed to be safe. I grabbed the notebook, intending to run straight to the precinct, but then I heard it, the heavy thud of the basement door opening. I didn't have time to get back out the window. I scrambled into the only place I could find, a small service closet filled with mops and buckets. Through the slat in the door, I saw Arthur walk in. He wasn't whistling or smiling. His face was blank, almost robotic. He walked straight to the desk and noticed the open drawer. His entire demeanor changed. He didn't look angry, he looked focused. He reached into his belt and pulled out a hammer. I stopped breathing. I pressed my back against the cold brick wall of the closet, praying he couldn't hear my heart. He stood in the middle of the room for what felt like an eternity, turning in a slow circle. He knew someone was there. He walked toward the closet, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. Just as his hand touched the knob, his phone rang. It was another tenant complaining about a leak. He paused, hissed a curse under his breath, and walked out, locking the office door behind him. I didn't wait. I climbed back out that window so fast I scraped my arms raw. I didn't go back to my apartment. I ran 3 blocks to a busy bodega and called 911. When the police arrived, I was hyperventilating. I gave them the notebook. I told them about the camera. They went to the building, but Arthur was gone. He had a sixth sense for danger. By the time they kicked in his door, he had vanished through a service tunnel that led from the basement to an alleyway half a block away. They searched the building. They found the sandalwood cologne in his locker, along with keys to 12 other apartments in the neighborhood. But the real horror came 2 days later. Forensic teams searched the basement of another building Arthur had managed 5 years prior. Under the concrete floor of the boiler room, they found 3 shallow graves, 3 women who had lived alone, 3 women who probably thought Arthur was a nice guy too. I moved out that night. I didn't even go back for my furniture. I left everything. I live in a high-rise now with 24-hour security and 3 different locks on my door. But sometimes when I'm getting ready for bed, I'll catch a scent of sandalwood in the air and I'll freeze. The police never caught him. He's still out there, probably managing another building, probably holding the door open for another young woman moving in. He'll fix her sink. He'll check her heater. He'll be the nicest guy she's ever met. The police found the sandalwood cologne in his locker, along with keys to 12 other apartments. But sometimes the monster isn't a stranger with a key. Sometimes he's the most popular person in the room. Everyone in this small town of Oak Haven loved Marcus. He was the kind of guy who made you feel like you were the only person in the world when he talked to you. He was the high school track star, the kid who volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend, the one who always had a smile and a helpful hand for the elderly residents on Main Street. If you needed your driveway shoveled or your cat rescued from a tree, you called Marcus. He was the golden boy of Sector 4, the neighborhood where the lawns were perfectly manicured and the houses all had wraparound porches. My name is Leo. I was 19, a sophomore at the local community college, and I had the honor of sharing a rented house with Marcus. My parents were thrilled when they found out I'd be living with him. They thought his ambition and kindness would rub off on me. For the first few months, I thought so too. Marcus was the perfect roommate. He was clean, he paid his rent early, and he was always bringing home extra food from the diner where he worked part-time. But there was something off about his schedule. Oak Haven is a quiet town. By 10 p.m., the streets are usually empty, but Marcus would go out. He'd tell me he was going for a late-night run to keep his track times up. I didn't think much of it until I started noticing the state of his clothes when he came back. It was always around 3 a.m. I'm a gamer, so I'd be up late in the living room and I'd see him slip through the back door. He wouldn't see me in the shadows. He'd be covered in red clay. Not the kind of dirt you find on the track or the paved roads. It was a specific thick red clay that only exists in the deep woods near the old limestone quarries. The first sign of real trouble wasn't the clay, though. It was the animals. Oak Haven started having a massive problem with missing pets. It began with a few outdoor cats, and then a couple of golden retrievers. People were devastated. Marcus was at the forefront of the search parties. He'd spend his afternoons putting up flyers and comforting crying children. He even brought a stray puppy home one day, saying he'd found it shivering near the shelter and couldn't leave it there. He seemed so compassionate. But one night, Marcus left his laptop open in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear. I just wanted to look up a recipe. The screen was on a map of the county, but it wasn't a normal map. There were dozens of little red pins dropped in specific locations. I realized with a jolt that every pin corresponded to a house where a pet had gone missing, and on the side of the screen there was a folder titled Trophies. I shouldn't have opened it. My hand was shaking as I clicked the mouse. Inside were hundreds of photos. They weren't of pets, they were photos of people, but they weren't normal photos. They were taken through windows, from the darkness of the woods, photos of our neighbors eating dinner, photos of the girl who lived 3 houses down sleeping in her bed. And then I saw the scores written in the metadata of the files. Ease of access, 9/10, response time, slow, visibility, low. The golden boy wasn't saving lives. He was scouting them. He was using his nice guy reputation to learn the layouts of everyone's homes, to figure out who lived alone and who kept their back doors unlocked. The red clay wasn't from running. It was from crouching in the mud outside people's windows for hours on end. The peak event happened when Marcus invited me on a camping trip to the quarries. He said we needed some bro time. I was terrified, but I didn't want him to know I'd seen his files. I thought if I acted normal, I could find a way to get to the police later. We hiked deep into the woods, far past where the trails ended. As night fell, the atmosphere changed. The infectious smile Marcus always wore vanished. He became silent. I woke up at midnight to the sound of metal on stone. I looked out from my tent and saw Marcus sitting by the dying embers of the fire. He was sharpening a long hunting knife, his eyes fixed on my tent. There was no kindness in his face anymore. It was completely blank, devoid of any emotion. He looked like a machine. I stayed paralyzed in my sleeping bag, clutching my phone, praying for daylight. He didn't attack me that night. I think he enjoyed the power of knowing I was scared. But a week later, he was arrested after a botched abduction attempt in the next town over. When the police searched our attic, they found a hidden room behind a false wall. It wasn't just photos. They found a collection of collars from the missing pets, and worse, a collection of personal items from the people he had been stalking. Purses, house keys, even locks of hair. The town still can't believe the boy who carried groceries for the elderly was the same man who stalked the woods at night. They remember the golden boy. I remember the man with the knife and the blank stare. Technology has made it easier than ever for these predators to hide behind a curated, nice profile. And sometimes the perfect match is actually your worst nightmare. He was a 10/10 on every dating app, a pediatric nurse, a marathon runner, and a volunteer at the local library. On paper, he was the man every woman in Chicago was looking for, but the first sign of danger wasn't a creepy message or a red flag in his bio. It was when he mentioned my childhood dog's name before I ever told him. I thought I'd finally found the man of my dreams, until I realized he had been matching with me for 3 years, under different names, waiting for the perfect version of himself to finally win me over. Technology has made it easier than ever for these predators to hide behind a curated, nice profile, and Ethan was a master of the digital mask. My name is Maya. I'm 30, and I work as a marketing executive for a firm in the Loop. My life is fast-paced, high-stress, and largely digital. Like most professionals in the city, I didn't have time to meet people at bars, so I relied on high-end dating apps. I'd been through my fair share of ghosting and bad dates, so when I matched with Ethan, it felt like I'd hit the lottery. His profile was wholesome. Photos of him finishing a marathon, a shot of him in scrubs at Northwestern Memorial, and a picture of him reading to kids. He was polite, he respected my boundaries, and he never pushed for anything. Our first few dates were perfect. He was a gentleman in a way that felt almost old-fashioned. He'd pick me up, open the car door, and always had a thoughtful question ready. But the perfection started to feel heavy after a month. We were walking through Lincoln Park one Sunday morning when he pointed to a small, obscure coffee shop tucked away on a side street. He said, "Let's go there. I know you love their triple-shot oat milk latte with 2 pumps of vanilla." I froze. I had never told him my coffee order. In fact, I'd never even mentioned that specific shop to him. It was a place I only went to on Tuesday mornings before work. When I asked him how he knew that, he just laughed it off. He told me I must have mentioned it during our first date. He said it was such a warm, sincere smile that I actually started to doubt my own memory. Maybe I had mentioned it. I was tired that night. Maybe it just slipped my mind. That's how it starts. They give you a logical explanation for something impossible, and you choose to believe them because the alternative, that they're stalking you, is too terrifying to face. The situation worsened when Ethan started showing up near my office. He'd just happened to be in the area for a medical conference and asked if I wanted to grab a quick lunch. My office is in a secure building, but Ethan somehow knew the exact layout of the floor I worked on. He'd mentioned how nice the view from the east side break room must be. I worked on the west side. The only way to know about the east break room was to have been inside the restricted area of the office. My sister, Elena, was the only one who saw through him. Elena was a paralegal, naturally skeptical, and fiercely protective. We had dinner one night, the 3 of us, and she grilled him. She asked about his nursing shifts, his marathon times, his family. Ethan handled it all with grace, never once losing his cool. But after he left, Alina pulled me aside. She told me his eyes didn't match his mouth. She said he looked like he was performing a role he'd rehearsed 1,000 times. She told me to be careful, that no one is that perfect. 2 days later, Alina went missing. She didn't show up for work. She didn't answer my calls. Her car was still in her driveway, her purse on the kitchen counter. The police treated it as a missing person case, but they didn't have much to go on. There was no sign of a struggle. I was a wreck. Ethan was there for me every second. He brought me food. He sat with me while I cried. He even helped me coordinate with the private investigator I hired. He was the perfect support system. But as the days turned into a week, a dark thought started to take root in my mind. Alina had been the only person to challenge him. I started to feel like I was suffocating. Ethan was always there. If I wasn't with him, he was texting me. If I didn't reply within 10 minutes, he'd call to check on my mental health. It wasn't love, it was surveillance. I felt like a prisoner in my own grief. I began to notice things about him that I'd ignored before. The way he never talked about his past in detail. The way he'd sometimes repeat things I'd only said in private phone calls to my mother. The turning point came on a Tuesday night. Ethan was in the shower and his gym bag was sitting on the hallway bench. I knew I shouldn't, but I was desperate for something to prove I wasn't losing my mind. I reached into the side pocket, expecting to find a heart rate monitor or gym chalk. Instead, I felt something small and plastic. I pulled it out. It was a device I didn't recognize at first, about the size of a deck of cards with several wires and a small antenna. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. I tucked the device into my pocket and went to my laptop. A quick search told me exactly what it was. It was a high-end SIM card cloner and interceptor. It allowed someone to mirror another person's phone in real time. Every text I sent, every call I made, every GPS location I visited, he was seeing all of it. He wasn't guessing my coffee order. He was tracking my movements and reading my messages for months. Then I found the second item in the bag. A small blue flash drive. I plugged it into my laptop, my hand shaking so much I almost dropped it. The drive was filled with folders, each labeled with a year: 2021, 2022, 2023. I clicked on 2021. There were hundreds of screenshots of my Instagram, my LinkedIn, even my old dating profiles. He had been matching with me under different aliases for 3 years. Every time I rejected a profile, he'd analyze why and create a new one. He had built Ethan specifically to be my perfect match based on 3 years of digital surveillance. But the last folder was the one that broke me. It was labeled with the current date. Inside were photos of Alina, not just photos of her at dinner, but photos of her tied to a chair in a room with boarded up windows. She was alive, but she looked terrified. The metadata on the photos showed they had been taken that morning. I heard the shower stop, the metallic clink of the curtain being pulled back. I didn't think. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and the flash drive. I ran out the front door and down the hallway. I didn't wait for the elevator. I took the stairs, 6 flights, my lungs burning. I got to my car in the parking garage and peeled out, the tires screaming against the concrete. I dialed 911 as I hit the street, but before I could even speak to the dispatcher, I saw a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. It was Ethan's silver SUV. He must have realized I'd seen the drive. He wasn't being a gentleman anymore. He was driving like a man possessed, weaving through the late-night Chicago traffic, closing the gap between us. I hit the I-90, pushing my car to 80, then 90. My chest felt tight. I couldn't think straight. All I knew was I had to get to the police station in the 1st District. The chase lasted for 10 agonizing minutes. He tried to ram my back bumper, sending my car fishtailing toward the concrete barrier. I managed to correct it, but he was right there, his face illuminated by the dashboard lights. He looked calm. That was the most terrifying part. He wasn't raging. He was just focused on the task at hand. I saw a construction zone ahead, the lanes narrowing down to one. I slammed on my brakes at the last second, swerving behind a line of orange barrels. Ethan wasn't as lucky. He tried to follow, but he was going too fast. His SUV clipped a heavy water barrier, flipped onto its side, and skidded 300 feet across the asphalt, sparks flying into the night air. I stopped my car a safe distance away and waited. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air. Blue and red lights reflected off the shattered glass of his windshield. The police pulled him from the wreckage. He was bleeding from a gash on his forehead, but he didn't struggle. He just watched me. When the officers searched his vehicle, they found more than just the flash drive. In the trunk, tucked under a spare tire, was a professional-grade kidnapping kit. Zip ties, duct tape, sedative vials, and a heavy-duty stun gun. But the most chilling discovery was a stack of physical Polaroids. They were photos of 4 other women who had gone missing in the Midwest over the last 5 years. He had used the same perfect match script on every one of them. They found Alina 2 hours later. He'd been keeping her in a rented storage unit on the outskirts of the city. She was dehydrated and traumatized, but she was alive. She told the police that he'd planned to kill her once he was finished with me because she was the only obstacle left in his way. The most terrifying part wasn't the kidnapping kit or the storage unit. It was the fact that he still looked like a gentleman in his mugshot. He had his hair neatly combed, a slight, polite smile on his lips, as if he were just waiting for the next match to pop up on his screen. Ethan was sentenced to life without parole, linked to at least 4 cold cases of missing women. I don't use dating apps anymore. I don't even like having my GPS turned on. My friends tell me I should try to move on, that not everyone is a monster. But I know better now. I know that someone can spend years studying you, learning your fears, your likes, and your routine, all just to build a cage that looks like a dream home. Sometimes the person you trust most in your neighborhood is the one you should fear the most. Check your privacy settings. Look at who's following you, because the perfect match might not be a coincidence, it might be a calculation. If you've ever had a weird feeling about someone you met online, trust it. Subscribe to stay informed and stay safe. We're just getting started. One more story. This one is the most disturbing case I've ever covered. Mr. Henderson was the neighborhood watch captain who always checked on the single mothers on the block. In our quiet little suburb in Ohio, he was the man everyone turned to. He had that classic grandfatherly charm, always wearing a beige cardigan, even in the humid Midwestern summers, and carrying a tin of butter cookies for the kids. But he wasn't watching the neighborhood to keep it safe. He was scouting. He was learning our patterns, our weaknesses, and our secrets. The first sign of a nightmare was the gift he left on my porch, a silver necklace I had lost inside my locked house 2 weeks prior. He wasn't just a helpful neighbor. He was a man who had turned the entire street into his own private surveillance booth. My name is Sarah. I'm 34, a registered nurse. And at the time, I was a recently divorced single mother trying to raise 2 young children while working the graveyard shift at the local county hospital. Living in a suburb of Columbus felt like the right move for a fresh start. It was the kind of place where people left their bikes on the lawn and didn't think twice about it. And having Mr. Henderson next door felt like a blessing. He was a retired widower who seemed to have nothing but time and kindness to offer. He'd mow my lawn when he saw the grass getting a little too high. He'd bring in my trash cans on Tuesday mornings before I even got home from my shift. He was the nice guy every single mother dreams of having as a neighbor. But the help started to feel intrusive. It was mid-October when I first noticed the back door. I'm a nurse. I'm obsessive about checklists. I remember locking that door before I put the kids in the car for school. But when I'd get home at 7:30 a.m., bone-tired and smelling like antiseptic, the deadbolt would be turned back. At first, I blamed myself. Sleep deprivation does strange things to the brain. I thought maybe I'd walked out the back to check the weather and forgotten, but then things started getting fixed. I had a leaky faucet in the kitchen that I'd been meaning to call a plumber for. One morning I walked in and it was silent. No drip. I looked under the sink and there was a brand new PVC pipe. No bill. No note. When I saw Mr. Henderson later that day, he just waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, I heard it through the window while I was weeding the flower beds, Sarah. I figured I'd save you the $75 service fee. A woman in your position has enough to worry about." It was so kind. It was so helpful. So why did it make the hair on my arms stand up? He had to have come inside while I was asleep or while I was at work. He had a key or he knew how to pick my locks. The situation worsened as winter approached. The gaslighting, whether he intended it or not, began to take a toll on my mental health. I started doubting my own reality. I'd leave my keys on the hook and I'd find them on the kitchen table. I'd leave the milk in the fridge and find it on the counter. Every time I mentioned it to Mr. Henderson, he'd give me this sympathetic, pitying look. "You're working too hard, Sarah. The night shift is a killer. You should really let me watch the kids more often so you can catch up on your rest." He was positioning himself as my only solution, the only person who could help me manage the chaos of my life. Inside, I felt a creeping dread. It was a cold, heavy weight in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I had felt like I was being watched, even when the curtains were drawn. Every creak of the floorboards in my old house felt like a footstep. I started staying awake after my shifts, sitting in the dark kitchen with a cup of coffee, just listening. I felt ungrateful, which was the worst part. How do you tell the man who mows your lawn and fixes your plumbing that he scares the hell out of you? You don't. You smile, you say thank you, and you lock your bedroom door at night. Then came the gift. I had a silver locket that belonged to my mother. I kept it in a velvet jewelry box on my nightstand. I hadn't worn it in months because the chain was fragile. One morning after a particularly brutal shift in the ER, I found it sitting on the railing of my front porch. It was clean, polished, and the broken clasp had been repaired. There was no card, but I knew. My bedroom was on the second floor. To get that locket, someone had to walk past my children's rooms into my private space and take it from the one place I thought was sacred. The escalation moved from my home to my workplace. I was at the nurse's station at 2 a.m. when I saw a familiar beige cardigan in the waiting room. It was Mr. Henderson. He told the triage nurse he was just checking in because he saw my car was low on air when he walked his dog, and he wanted to make sure I got home safe. The hospital is 30 miles from our neighborhood. He hadn't walked his dog to my workplace. He had followed me. He stood there smiling that grandfatherly smile while my heart hammered against my ribs. He was marking his territory. He was letting me know that there was nowhere I could go where he wouldn't be watching. The turning point happened on a Saturday afternoon. My son Toby was playing with a ball in the backyard when it went over the high wooden fence into Mr. Henderson's yard. Henderson wasn't home. I'd seen him drive off to the hardware store 20 minutes earlier. I told Toby to stay put, and I hopped the fence to grab the ball. It had rolled near the basement window of his house. I don't know why I looked. Maybe it was the intuition I'd been suppressing for months. The basement window was partially obscured by overgrown bushes, but there was a gap in the blinds. I leaned in, and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a workshop down there. It was a command center. Against the far wall was a bank of 6 high-definition monitors. I could see the street. I could see the neighbor's driveway. And on the largest screen in the center was my living room. Then it switched. My kitchen, my hallway. The camera angle was from the smoke detector I'd never questioned, the one he'd installed for me as a fire safety favor. I wasn't the only one. He had feeds from at least 4 other houses on the block. He was watching the elderly couple across the street, the young professionals 3 doors down, and me. He had turned our quiet cul-de-sac into a human terrarium. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to lean against the cold foundation of his house. I grabbed the ball and scrambled back over the fence, my mind racing. I needed to call the police, but what would I say? I had trespassed on his property, and he was the neighborhood watch captain. He was friends with the local sheriff. I decided to pack a bag and take the kids to a hotel. I told them we were going on a surprise sleepover. But as I was loading the car, Mr. Henderson's Buick pulled into his driveway. He didn't get out of the car. He just sat there behind the wheel, watching me. He didn't wave, he didn't smile, he just stared. I realized then that he probably had a mobile feed on his phone. He knew I'd been in his yard. He knew I'd seen the monitors. That night, the nightmare hit its peak. I couldn't sleep in the hotel. So I decided to go back to the house while the kids were asleep under my sister's watch. I'd called her to meet us there. I needed to get my dash cam from my car. I'd left it running, and I hoped it had caught him doing something, anything, to give the police a reason to search his house. I pulled into my driveway at midnight. The street was silent. As I stepped out of the car, I smelled it. Smoke, not a fireplace or a grill. It was the acrid chemical smell of burning plastic and accelerant. I looked at my house and I saw orange light flickering in the kitchen window. My heart stopped. My first thought was the kids. Then I remembered they were safe with my sister. My second thought was the nice guy next door. Before I could even reach for my phone, Mr. Henderson was there. He appeared out of the shadows of my porch like a ghost. "Sarah, thank God you're here. I saw the smoke and I was just about to go in and rescue you." He was carrying a heavy wool blanket and a flashlight. He moved toward the front door, reaching for the handle. But I saw his hands. They were clean. There was no suit, no panic. He had started the fire so he could be the hero. He wanted to rescue me from a tragedy he created, to make me forever indebted to him. I didn't play along. I backed away, screaming at the top of my lungs for someone to call 911. He tried to grab my arm, his face contorting into something ugly and desperate. "Don't be hysterical, Sarah. Trying to help you. You're not thinking straight." He was still trying to gaslight me while my house was burning behind him. The police and fire department arrived within minutes. The fire was contained to the kitchen, but the investigation turned up something Henderson hadn't counted on. My dash cam, which I'd positioned to face the house, had recorded him walking up to my back door with a red gasoline can 10 minutes before the fire started. It also recorded him disabling my external Ring camera with a piece of tape. When they searched his house, the neighborhood watch persona evaporated instantly. They found the surveillance room I'd seen, but they found something even worse in the crawl space under his tool shed. They found the remains of 2 women who had lived in that same house years before I moved in. Both had been friends of Mr. Henderson, both had disappeared without a trace, and at the time he had been the one leading the search parties. He died in prison 3 years later, still insisting he was just trying to be a good neighbor. He never showed a moment of remorse. To him, the surveillance, the breaking and entering, and even the murders were just his way of taking care of the people around him. He truly believed his own lie. I moved away from Ohio after that. I live in a house now where I know every inch of the wiring, every pipe, and every neighbor. But I don't talk to them. I don't accept cookies. I don't let anyone mow my lawn. My friends think I'm cold. They think I'm paranoid. But I know that the nice guy next door isn't always who he says he is. Sometimes the person watching the neighborhood isn't looking for burglars. They're looking for you. Check your smoke detectors. Look for small holes in the plastic. And if your neighbor is a little too helpful, a little too present, trust your gut. It only takes one nice guy to turn your life into a horror story. Subscribe to stay informed and stay safe. For our final story, we look at a man whose professional reputation was so perfect, it became his deadliest weapon. This is the most disturbing case I've ever covered. Dr. Sterling was the most respected physician in the county, known for his bedside manner and his legendary miracle recoveries. In our small rural pocket of Virginia, he was more than just a doctor. He was a pillar of the community, the kind of man who would check on your sick grandmother on his way home from church and never send a bill. But the first sign of the horror wasn't a medical error or a malpractice suit. It was the high mortality rate of his healthiest patients during routine procedures. He didn't just save lives. He believed he had the right to decide when they should end. The community still remembers him as the gentleman who held their hands during their darkest hours, never realizing that he was the one who had invited the darkness into the room. My name is Alina. I'm 32, and for 5 years, I worked as a surgical nurse at our local hospital. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone's business, and a man's reputation is his most valuable currency. Dr. Sterling had more currency than anyone. He was soft-spoken, always smelled of expensive peppermint and antiseptic, and had a way of making every patient feel like they were his only priority. He was the nice guy of the medical world, the one the younger residents looked up to and the older nurses adored. I idolized him too at first. I saw him as the gold standard of what a healer should be. But the situation worsened during a particularly busy flu season. We were short-staffed and I was pulling extra shifts in the intensive care unit. That was when I first noticed the pattern. It wasn't the terminal patients who were passing away. It was the ones who were supposed to go home. I remember a young man, only 24, who had come in for a simple appendectomy. He was recovering perfectly, joking with the staff in the morning. Dr. Sterling went in for a private round at 6 p.m., and by 6:15 p.m., the code blue was ringing through the halls. Respiratory failure, no apparent cause. I tried to tell myself it was a fluke. Medicine is unpredictable. But then it happened again 3 nights later. A woman in her 50s, recovering from a successful gallbladder surgery, died within minutes of Dr. Sterling leaving her room. Again, respiratory failure. The room felt heavy every time he walked out of a patient's door, but he always looked so devastated, so profoundly shaken by the loss, that no one dared to point a finger. He would sit in the break room with his head in his hands, and we would comfort him. We felt sorry for the nice man who was losing so many patients to bad luck. Inside, I was starting to crumble. My chest felt tight every time I saw him approaching the ICU. I started staying late, double-checking the charts, looking for something, anything that could explain why healthy hearts were just stopping. My internal monologue was a constant battle of self-doubt. Am I crazy? This is Dr. Sterling. He's a saint. He's been practicing for 20 years. But the nursing intuition I developed over a decade was screaming at me. Something was happening in those rooms when the curtains were closed. The emotional deepening of the situation became unbearable. I felt like I was the only one seeing the shadow behind his smile. I'd watch him talk to the grieving families. His voice thick with a practiced, gentle sympathy, and I'd feel a wave of nausea. I started having nightmares about the peppermint smell of his breath. I was terrified that if I spoke up, the entire hospital would turn against me. In a small town, questioning a man like Sterling is a professional suicide mission. I was isolated, trapped between my duty to my patients and my fear of a man who seemed to have the entire town under a spell. Then came the first piece of physical evidence. I was cleaning out the personal lockers in the surgical wing, a task we did every month to keep the area sterile. I noticed Dr. Sterling's locker was slightly ajar. I shouldn't have looked, but the curiosity was a physical itch I couldn't ignore. Tucked behind a stack of medical journals was a small, unprescribed vial. It was potassium chloride. In a hospital, that's a controlled substance. It's used in heart surgeries, but in the wrong dose. It's a lethal injection that leaves almost no trace in a standard toxicology screen. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I put the vial back. I didn't report it, not yet. I knew I needed more. I needed to understand why. If he was killing people, there had to be a reason, a logic to the madness. A week later, I found myself at his house. He'd invited a few of us over for a thank you dinner after a particularly grueling week. It was a beautiful colonial-style home on the outskirts of town, filled with antique furniture and the smell of wood smoke. When he went to the cellar to get another bottle of wine, I slipped into his home office. It was a room filled with leather-bound books and awards. On his desk, hidden inside a hollowed-out medical dictionary, I found a small black ledger. The cover had no title, but the first page was headed with 3 words: The Book of Mercy. I flipped through the pages, my breath hitching in my throat. It was a meticulously kept record of death. He had listed 24 patients over the last 2 years. Next to each name was the date of their death, the dose administered, and most disturbingly, a politeness rating. He would rank the patients from 1 to 10 based on how respectful they were to the staff, how grateful they seemed for his care. If a patient was difficult or if they questioned his authority, their rating was low. The turning point was a page near the back. It was dated for the next morning. It had a name I recognized: Marcus. He was a 19-year-old athlete who had been admitted for a broken leg, but had been complaining loudly about the hospital food and the slow response times of the night shift. Dr. Sterling had given him a politeness rating of 2. Next to his name, in neat, elegant cursive, Sterling had written, "Tonight he finds peace." I didn't leave the house with the book. I was too afraid he'd catch me. I went straight to the hospital the next morning, but I didn't go to the administration. I knew they'd protect him. I went straight to the ICU and waited. At 7 p.m., Dr. Sterling walked in wearing his signature beige sweater over his scrubs. He looked calm, happy, and ready to do his rounds. I watched him enter Marcus's room. I gave it 30 seconds, then I pushed the door open. He was standing over the boy's bed, a syringe already pressed into the IV port. He didn't jump. He didn't even look surprised. He just looked at me with those kind, crinkly eyes and said, "Alina, you're always so diligent." I was just giving Marcus something to help him sleep. He's been so restless. "I know what's in that syringe, doctor," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady, even though I felt like I was going to faint. "And I know about the ledger." I saw the Book of Mercy. The transformation was instant. The nice guy mask didn't just slip. It evaporated. His face went cold, his eyes turning into 2 chips of ice. He didn't yell. He didn't move toward me. He just stood there, the syringe still in his hand, and whispered, "You don't understand the burden of being a god, Alina. These people are ungrateful. They are a drain on the world. I am simply cleaning the scales." I didn't argue. I reached for the emergency code blue button on the wall and slammed it. Within seconds, the room was flooded with other nurses and security. Sterling didn't resist. He dropped the syringe on the floor and put his hands up, a small, sad smile returning to his face. By the time the police arrived, he was already playing the victim, telling everyone I was suffering from a mental breakdown due to the stress of the flu season. It took 6 months of investigation to piece it all together. They found the ledger in his home, along with a collection of souvenirs from his victims, small items like wedding rings or hospital wristbands. Dr. Sterling was sentenced to life in prison, but the investigation suggested his mercy killings spanned 3 different states in over 20 years. He may have killed more than 50 people. The most chilling part isn't the number of victims. It's the community's reaction. Even after the trial, even after the ledger was made public, many of his former patients refused to believe he was a killer. They remembered only the nice men who held their hand when they were scared. The doctor who always had a peppermint for the kids. They couldn't reconcile the hero they loved with the monster who decided who lived and who died based on a politeness rating. Dr. Sterling died in prison 2 years into his sentence. To this day, there are still flowers left at his empty house by people who insist he was framed. They choose to remember the mask. I choose to remember the ledger. Check your surroundings. Look at the people who seem too perfect, the ones who always have the right answer and the softest touch. Because sometimes the person you trust with your life is the one who's already decided how it's going to end. These were the 5 most disturbing nice guy serial killer stories. Each of them used kindness as a weapon, a shield to hide the darkness within. If you've ever had a nice neighbor, doctor, or a match who gave you the creeps, let me know in the comments. Your intuition is your most powerful survival tool. Don't ignore it. Subscribe to join our community of investigators. Stay safe out there, because you never know who's watching or who's holding the key to your front door, doctor. Sterling was the most respected physician in the county. A man whose professional reputation was so perfect, it became his deadliest weapon. In our small pocket of rural Virginia, your doctor isn't just a service provider. He's the person who knows your family's secrets, your physical vulnerabilities, and your deepest fears. Dr. Sterling had been our town's savior for over 20 years. He was a gentleman of the old school, always dressed in a crisp white coat, smelling of peppermint and expensive antiseptic, with a voice that could calm a panicked mother in seconds. But the first sign of the horror wasn't a medical error or a messy malpractice suit. It was the high mortality rate of his healthiest patients during routine procedures. He didn't just save lives. He believed he had the right to decide when they should end. He was the ultimate nice guy, the kind of man who held your hand while you were dying, never letting you know that he was the one who had invited the darkness into the room. My name is Alina. I'm 32, and for years, I worked as a surgical nurse alongside Dr. Sterling. I saw him as a mentor, a man of infinite patience and kindness, but the situation worsened during a particularly heavy winter. We were seeing a lot of routine cases, appendectomies, gallbladder removals, minor orthopedic repairs. These were the bread and butter of our small hospital. The kind of surgeries where patients are usually up and walking within 24 hours. But that winter they weren't walking out. They were leaving in body bags. I remember the first time I felt that cold, prickly sensation of doubt. It was a Tuesday night. We had a patient, a 24-year-old athlete named Marcus, who had come in for a simple repair of a torn ligament. He was a healthy, vibrant kid with no underlying conditions. After the surgery, Dr. Sterling went in for a private round to check his vitals. 10 minutes later, the code blue alarm was screaming through the ICU. Marcus had suffered a sudden, catastrophic respiratory failure. I watched Dr. Sterling lead the resuscitation effort with a look of profound, heart-wrenching grief. He worked on that boy for 45 minutes, well past the point of hope, and when he finally called the time of death, he wept openly in the break room. We all comforted him. We felt sorry for the nice man who cared too much. But as the weeks went by, the pattern became impossible to ignore. It was always the same, a successful routine procedure. A private visit from Dr. Sterling, a sudden respiratory arrest. I started staying late, obsessively checking the medication logs and the waste bins. My internal monologue was a constant battle of self and doubt. I told myself I was being paranoid, that medicine is a game of statistics, and sometimes the numbers just fall the wrong way. But then I found the vial. It was tucked into the back of a sharps container in the surgical lounge, a small, empty vial of potassium chloride that hadn't been scanned into the system. It's a common drug, but in a concentrated dose. It's a lethal injection that leaves almost no trace in a standard toxicology screen. The emotional deepening of this discovery was paralyzing. I felt like I was the only person in the world who could see the shadow behind Dr. Sterling's smile. Every time he spoke to a patient, I saw the predator behind the peppermint-scented breath. I started losing sleep, my mind racing with the images of all the miracle recoveries that hadn't happened. I was terrified of him, but I was even more terrified of being wrong. In a town like ours, accusing Dr. Sterling of murder was like accusing a priest of heresy. You don't just lose your job, you lose your life as you know it. The turning point came when I decided to take a risk I can never take back. Dr. Sterling had invited several of the senior staff to his home for a holiday dinner. It was a beautiful, sprawling colonial house filled with antiques and the smell of wood smoke. While the others were in the kitchen discussing the hospital's budget, I slipped away to his private study. I told myself I was looking for a phone charger, but I was looking for a confession. I found it in a hollowed-out medical dictionary on his bookshelf. It was a meticulously kept ledger, bound in black leather, titled The Book of Mercy. I opened it, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Inside were the names of every patient who had died under his care over the last 2 decades. But it wasn't just a list, it was a ranking system. He had graded each patient on their politeness and their gratitude. Marcus, the young athlete, had a politeness rating of 2. Beside his name, Sterling had written in neat, elegant script, "Too arrogant for this world, lacks respect for the healing arts, a necessary subtraction." I realized then that Dr. Sterling didn't kill for money or for a thrill. He killed because he believed he was the ultimate judge of human character. If a patient was rude to a nurse, if they questioned his diagnosis, or if they didn't show the proper amount of reverence for his position, he decided they were a drain on society. He was playing God in a white coat, and his nice guy persona was the perfect camouflage for a megalomaniac. The great climax happened the following morning. I knew I couldn't go to the hospital. Board Sterling was golf partners with the CEO. I had to catch him in the act. I went into work early and saw that a new patient, an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, was scheduled for a private round. She was a notoriously difficult patient, sharp-tongued and demanding, exactly the kind of person Sterling's ledger had marked for mercy. I hid in the supply closet adjacent to her room. My heart was hammering so hard I thought he would hear it through the wall. I heard the door open, the soft click of the lock, and the gentle, soothing voice of the doctor. "Now, Mrs. Gable, let's get you something for that discomfort. You've been so spirited today." I peered through the slat in the closet door and saw him pulling a pre-filled syringe from his pocket. He wasn't checking her vitals. He was reaching for the foreport. I didn't think. I burst out of the closet and grabbed his arm. The syringe fell to the floor. The clear liquid sprang across the linoleum. For a split second, the mask didn't just slip, it disintegrated. The kind, crinkly eyes turned into 2 black pits of pure, unadulterated rage. It didn't look like a doctor anymore. He looked like a cornered animal. "You've always been too curious for your own good, Elena," he whispered. His voice was low, devoid of any of the warmth he'd spent 20 years cultivating. He tried to lung for me, his hands reaching for my throat, but I was younger and faster. I slammed the emergency code button on the wall and screamed at the top of my lungs. The hospital erupted into chaos. Security and other nurses flooded the room, finding the most respected man in the county standing over a terrified patient with a lethal dose of potassium on the floor. The fall of Dr. Sterling was swift but agonizingly public. When the police searched his home, they found the ledger. They found over 60 names. But the most disturbing part wasn't the evidence. It was the community's reaction. Even with the Book of Mercy entered into evidence, even with the vials and the testimony, there were people in our town who picketed the courthouse in his defense. They couldn't believe the nice man who had delivered their babies and attended their funerals was a serial killer. They chose the lie over the horrific truth. Dr. Sterling was sentenced to consecutive life terms, but the damage was permanent. Our small hospital nearly shut down. The trust that held our community together was shattered. People started looking at their neighbors, their teachers, and their local officials with a new, cold suspicion. We realized that the nice guy isn't just a trope, he's a disguise. He's the person who uses your social expectations of politeness to gain access to your most vulnerable moments. He died in prison 4 years into his sentence. He never showed a moment of remorse. In his final interview with a court psychologist, he said he felt like a gardener weeding a neglected patch of earth. He truly believed his murders were a service to humanity. To him, the world was a better place because he had removed the impolite. I moved away from Virginia after the trial. I couldn't work in a hospital anymore. Every time I see a man in a white coat or smell the scent of peppermint, my chest gets tight and I have to remind myself to breathe. I live in a different state now, under a different name, but the lesson stays with me every single day. These 5 stories, the polite handyman, the golden boy, the perfect match, the helpful neighbor, and the family doctor, all share a common, terrifying thread. They were all men who were loved, respected, and trusted. They didn't lurk in the shadows or wear masks. They lived in the light and wore the face of a friend. They used their niceness as a master key to unlock every door in our lives. The most disturbing truth about these serial killers isn't their methods or their numbers. It's the fact that they are exactly like the people you know. They are the ones who open the door for you at the grocery store. They are the ones who volunteer to watch your kids. They are the ones who listen to your problems and offer a shoulder to cry on. And they are counting on your desire to be polite to keep you from asking the questions that could save your life. So the next time someone seems a little too perfect, a little too helpful, or a little too nice, don't ignore that small, quiet voice in the back of your head. That's not paranoia. That's your survival instinct. Trust your gut. Question the mask. Because the person who's holding your hand might just be the person who's deciding when to let go. Check your locks. Watch your back. And never let the nice guy have the final word. If these stories chilled you to the bone, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below. Which of these nice guys was the most terrifying to you? Your engagement helps us bring more of these true horror stories to light. Subscribe to our channel and join our community of investigators. Stay vigilant, stay skeptical, and above all, stay safe. The world is full of monsters, and most of them have a very kind smile.